Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sandy Jones. I'm the Education and Client Services Coordinator for Parkinson Society, Central and Northern Ontario, and it is indeed my pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. Before we get started, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping matters. Please turn off your blackberries, your blueberries, your strawberries, and any other devices that you may have that might ring, glow in the dark, or vibrate. This is to ensure that you're not disrespectful to the speakers, but also to those around you. And also, as you can see, we are taping this evening's presentation, and it will be very difficult for the videographers to tune out those rings and bells, etc., when they go to put the video together for us. If you have not already found them, the washrooms are located through those back doors to your right. For those of you who may require any assistance, we are very pleased to have personal support workers from both Comfort Keepers and Home Instead Senior Care with us tonight, and they would be happy to assist you. They will be located toward the back, so if you need assistance, just put up your hand, and they will be very happy to come forward and see what they can do to help you. At this time, I would also like to thank AbbVie Pharma and also Elaine Connors for their generous support of all of our education events this year. Without their support, we would not be able to put on free events such as this evening. I would also like to gratefully acknowledge the financial support of the following companies, in no particular order, without whose help, again, we would not have made this event possible. So tonight we have with us Philips Lifeline, Elder Care Home Health, NHI Nursing and Homemakers, Elder Caring Inc., One Step Ahead Mobility, Amica Retirement Living, Verve, Mosaic Home Care, and before I go any further with Mosaic, I'd also like to say that they were kind enough to arrange for our lovely musician tonight, Andrea Gerhardt from Music Can Heal. Please put your hands together. Thank you. It was lovely. It was lovely. As we were getting ready and set up tonight, and as you all started to come through, I came in here, I don't think Andrea even knew that, a few times just to go, Sandy, breathe. Okay. I find music to be very healing, so thank you very much for that. We also have Premier Home Care with us, Home Instead, and Better Living Health. Again, without the financial support of all of these organizations, we just simply couldn't do this, so we're truly grateful. Please join me in thanking all of them for their support as well. Speaking of support, we also need your help. We have a monthly giving program at Parkinson Society, Central and Northern Ontario. You all have a green brochure on your tables. It's called Partners for Parkinson's. I haven't got time to go through all of the information about this wonderful monthly giving program. You could see my colleague, her name is Naseem Jamal, at her booth, which is literally right outside the door, for more information when we have the break, because having monthly donors really helps us a great deal. Tonight, we have a big incentive for you to become monthly donors. If you become a monthly donor tonight, or if you are already a monthly donor, and we thank you for that, we are going to have a draw. She has a red box at her table outside the door, and again, there will be a draw toward the end, and I'll explain that in a minute. But get this, are you listening? The draw is for a night's getaway for two, including breakfast, at the breathtaking Bayview Wildwood Village in the scenic village of Port Stanton, just 8 kilometers west of Highway 11. So if any of you would like a night to get away, then you know what you have to do. Just fill in your name, become a monthly donor. It doesn't have to be an onerous amount. $15 is just fine, whatever. And your name will be put into the box for the draw, and we'll draw for that night's getaway at the end of the evening. Please fill in your evaluation forms at the end of the evening. Now, I start out by being very nice and polite. Notice I've said, please fill in your evaluation forms. However, you really need to understand, you don't get to leave this facility unless you do. I have watchdogs everywhere. So if your evaluation forms that are on your tables are not filled in, and no, you can't do them now, you can't just say it was wonderful, although it will be, but I would really appreciate your feedback, because we're beginning to plan our sessions for the 2016 education sessions. And again, if you would like more information from us, etc., fill in those forms as well, and we'll be happy to make sure that you get all the information that you never wanted, but now you need. Okay. As well as the evaluation program on your, the evaluation on your table tonight, you'll find the program agenda, and you'll find a white index card, which we will ask you to put your name on and your phone number. And there is a basket on the table as you came through the door, because we have some nice prizes that we will be drawing for at the end of the evening. So make sure that you fill in those as well. You've already filled in, many of you, the passports. Thank you for doing that. So that draw will take place at the end of the evening, and then we have a couple of other exciting draws as well. So, okay. So how the evening is going to go. Our panel is going to speak for approximately 45 to 50 minutes, and then we're going to have a break. During the break, if you have not had a chance to already to take a moment to visit the booths, have the sponsors sign off on your passport cards, etc., be sure to do so at that time. There is a draw box at the back. Again, we're going to be drawing for those prizes at the end. There's a separate draw, as I've mentioned, for those who sign up to be monthly donors. We've talked about that. When we return from the break, and I please, please, please ask you to be prompt to do that. Please come back from the break within 10 minutes, because we really want to try to end this lovely evening on time. I will be then moderating a question and answer session with the various panelists. Okay. Some of you may wonder, how did we decide on this evening's topic of helping you make informed decisions about your future? Inevitably, all of us will encounter dealing with medical and social systems as we age. I'm one of them. Or as we help aging family members and friends, regardless of the diagnosis of Parkinson's. While you may think that most of my day involves speaking to people about Parkinson's disease, more often than not, it's about trying to help people to navigate through how they think things work and how things actually work. Sometimes when we plan a route for a journey, we want the quickest way, sometimes the scenic route. There's no right answer. If we get lost, we either need to look for a map or ask for directions. Now, some of you may have driven with a loved one who does not like to stop and ask for directions. Some of you might be that driver who doesn't stop and ask for directions. You turn the radio off as you drive in circles, trying to find something familiar to guide you. You sweat, you panic. If you're like me, you swear a little bit. Shh, I didn't say that out loud. But so often and so far have eventually gotten nowhere to where you wanted to go. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here with us tonight. Life is a journey too, and sometimes when we are in these uncharted territories, we need to ask experts for the best directions. And I know for a fact that some people tonight were like those drivers circling around, which was why there are even some empty seats here tonight, because some people have expressed to me they were really scared of what they might listen to or hear tonight. I say to all of you tonight, but especially to those who have finally chosen to watch the recording as well of tonight's session, I congratulate you all on your bravery in stopping to ask for directions. This may not be an easy conversation to have, but it's such an important one. I have wanted to do this type of a panel for a long time, getting different experts with different perspectives discussing some of the same issues in aging in place successfully. One of the first people I turned to with my idea was Jane Teasdale of Mosaic Home Care. Jane has a leading voice in the home care industry and has been for over 15 years. She's been an active member of the North York Elder Abuse Network for 7 years, of which she was co-chair for 2 years. She also served as co-chair for the Integrated Partnership for Seniors, a venture between nonprofit organizations and agencies and for-profit companies operating in the elderly and home care services industry to provide awareness and education of services. Jane has been a supporter of us at Parkinson Society for many years, and in someone that I have come to consider a true friend, and whose professional opinion I have come to trust, as someone who respects the needs of her clients. Jane introduced me to our first panelist tonight, Audrey Miller, who is the Managing Director of Elder Caring Incorporated. Audrey is a registered social worker and a certified life care planner with extensive background working with older adults and their caregiving families. As a recognized expert in care planning, aging, and caregiving issues, Audrey has appeared on television and radio and has been featured in many national news publications. Audrey is the founder and managing director of Elder Caring, Inc., a geriatric care managing company helping families navigate the healthcare and home care system, how to leverage community resources, and plan for the present and future stages. Audrey has authored hundreds of articles and blogs, etc., and you will be able to hear Audrey talk about things even like her latest work, which is the Wellness Binder, and it was described by the Financial Post as a planning tool with a difference. We are going to have some of these binders available as gifts for you later on when we do our draws as well. This binder is the keeper of the information, a place to capture everything about your health, your personal and caring information. Audrey, in turn, introduced us to, turn the page, Sandra, Bev Moyer, Associate Director, Senior Wealth Advisor and with Scotia McLeod. It would be helpful if I could talk. Bev is an investment advisor, financial planner, and retirement specialist who helps her clients achieve peace of mind through financial fitness, WellFit. Bev's 20 years in the industry have gifted her with the knowledge and expertise of many meaningful client and community relationships. Prior to becoming an investment advisor, Bev worked for many years in healthcare. Bev is a graduate nurse. Yes! She maintains links with healthcare companies as well as she's a member of the Women's College Hospital Foundation Finance, Investment, and Audit Committee, and as an honorary life member of the Registered Nurses Foundation of Ontario. Notice I got registered nurses in there twice. Again, we have another lovely speaker with us tonight who Audrey was able to manage to get for us, and her name is Sandra Stevenson. As soon as I find Sandra's information, I will read it. I apologize for that. There she is. Okay. Sandra is a lawyer at Evans, Sweeney, Borden. Sandra Stevenson practices in the areas of estate planning and administration and corporate law. She likes working in these two distinct areas of law because she can offer comprehensive support and advice to her business clients. She is adept at developing the best plans for clients which meet all their wealth planning and business succession needs. Sandra has developed a niche practice acting as both an attorney for property and an executor and trustee with a special skill in estate accounting. Sandra has a thoughtful and caring demeanor and is always responsive to her clients' needs. I think you, by having heard all of these introductions, will agree with me that our wonderful group of panelists tonight are very well suited for our topic of life's plans, how to make them, what to look for, and how they can help you. So please join me in welcoming all of our speakers. Audrey Miller is going to start, and then the panel will just flow through that. And at around 8 o'clock, we're going to have our break, which will be only about 10 minutes. So I hope you enjoy this presentation. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I'm just going to wait a moment while my technical friend gets us set up. Perfect. So pleased to be here tonight. And really, I think we have to start with congratulations. And Sandy's right. We're very happy that the rain decided to hold off until later this evening. That's a good sign. But tonight is about you, and it's about sharing information. Our goal, all three of us, and Sandy at the helm, it's about empowering you and making sure that you have the information to move forward. You know, the things that people fear most, besides public speaking and death, is being a burden to friends and family. And this is a journey. And caregiving takes two to caregive. It's a dyad. And so whether you're just starting the caregiving journey, whether you are a caregiver or a care recipient, tonight is about giving you the tools to be able to be better informed and to move forward. The areas that I'm going to briefly cover are major concerns that families who I'm dealing with say every day. Are my loved ones safe to be able to live on their own? We'll be talking about that. Are they getting the care they need? How do I know that? What about memory loss and dementia? What about burnout? Caregiver burnout is a big issue, with most caregivers waiting 5 years before they seek help. And what about the paperwork? Okay, so powers of attorney, which my colleague will be speaking about, advanced directives and wills, and thank you for mentioning the wellness binder, which is why I created the binder, to have a place that families could access where information could be stored. Having the conversation. So one of our key messages today is about starting and having the talk, preparing. And you're all here, so I take that as a very, very good step. The second point that we want to raise to ensure that you have is that you're not alone. And surely, by the support of the Parkinson Society and the people around you, you already know that there are many of you traveling down this path. So when we talk about conversations, we talk about it within our families. How do you share the information in a loving and non-threatening way? And it's difficult, I can tell you. We talk about I messages. This is what's important to me, I feel, I want, rather than you should. It's about respecting values. It's about respecting the person and their beliefs, whatever it is. And it's about choice. This is about understanding what your options are so all of you can make informed choices. All of us want to live at home for as long as we can, and I am no exception to that rule. So how do we do that? Well, let's talk for a moment about our public sector. And I'm very happy to be this side of the border that we have universal health care. However, you may also be reading in the paper that we're a little maxed out at the moment. So I'll share with you a little bit about my experience with the Community Care Access Center, or CCAC for short. That's our first point of contact for publicly funded services. And so one of the great services that the CCAC can provide are the services of a personal support worker, or PSW for short. There's lots of acronyms out there as you go through this journey, so I'll be very careful to try and relate them and spell them out for you. So we're talking about PSWs. So today in Ontario, and let me just say, anyone can refer to the Community Care Access Centre. It is not means tested. Any Ontario resident might apply, and they'll determine eligibility based on need. So today in Toronto, and just for a moment appreciate that there are 14 community care access centers that are funded through the local health integration network. Okay, so you have a bigger picture. So no matter where you are in the province, in theory, the services are the same, but each community care access handles their own budget. So today in Toronto, to be able to access a PSW from the CCAC, if an Ontario resident is eligible, today they can get about 14 hours of care a week. Now, that has recently dropped from 21 hours a week. I would say within the last 6 months, that's changed now to 14 hours. And that typically is about supervision during bathing. For the last client I had who received palliative care, the CCAC was able to provide 56 hours a week of care. Now, there are 168 hours in a week, so there's a lot of hours that the public sector cannot provide, and that often falls onto the shoulders of families. One of the things that families do, and I always say access what you can, first of all, from the public sector, is supplement privately. And so today in Toronto, on average, and there's a range across Canada, but I would say a good number to work with is about $25.50 an hour. And most agencies, as you talk to my colleagues who are out there with booths, have a 2 or 3 hour minimum. And care has a range of it, but people will say, $25 an hour, how can I afford that? I'm going to hire privately. And I'm going to suggest to you, buyer beware, insofar as the nanny looking after a child and their experience is very different for the experience of helping a senior with dementia and personal care. So you want to make sure that your PSW has appropriate training, their references have been checked, they've been bonded, they're secure, and they have supervision, meaning if that caregiver is sick, they're not going to come in and get you sick, but an agency is able to send a replacement. So there are some sheets out there if you decide to hire on your own with some questions from the Home Care Association so you can be better informed. And PSWs are available often on a 24-hour basis, as well as live-in. The least expensive way to bring in care is through the Live-In Caregiver Program, through Employment and Social Development Canada. The Foreign Temporary Workers Program is how you may know it. And that's about $25 a month. So on this chart, I've given you some highlights of what the cost of care can be, with the least expensive option being at the top. So for someone coming in through this program, you're hired. Many times you have to post a position, so we're not taking a position from someone who's already in Canada. And these are women who are coming in for their residency. So you, family, become the employer, and you provide room and board, deduct their taxes, and they can work 44 to 47 hours a week. 3 hours typical at $25.75 an hour. It can be $28,000 a year. We'll move up to 6 hours, $56,000 a year. 24 hours awake, it's over $200,000 a year. Mind-boggling. So there's also an option for overnight asleep. So when we talk about awake, it's because the care recipient is up several times in the night, and that caregiver needs to be awake and alert. So some big figures that we're dealing with for sure. And I know you're all thinking, how are we going to manage this? And so my colleagues will share some of that with you. But this is where we turn to ourselves in terms of what can we fund, what can I access, and how do I plan? I spend a lot of time with financial advisors on this very fact, to helping them inform their clients of what these costs can be so people can plan appropriately. Now, sometimes we can't stay at home forever. Our care needs may exceed what's available, or perhaps our home cannot be renovated. And so I talk about the 3 C's, and this is an article that I wrote for RBC's Advice Centre, the Royal Bank of Canada, and it's available free of charge on their Advice Centre site under Seniors, Finance and Caregiving. There's a series of videos and articles, and this is one of the articles. So when we're exploring whether someone can stay at home or look at alternative accommodation, we start with the first C. What's the care? What's my care requirement going to be? And what we know about Parkinson's, it's a progressive disease. So you might anticipate, I'm going to have care needs that are going to increase from where I ever am today to likely for my duration, however long that is. The second C is cost. So it's not just the cost of the care that we're looking at. We're also looking at what are your current daily expenses. So if you've got a mortgage, if you're dealing with snow removal, which is bound to come, unfortunately, or you're dealing with insurance and roof repairs, your food, your socialization, your transportation, your activity, all of these items need to be calculated so you have a clear picture of what you are spending today and what might your costs be tomorrow. Okay, because they do not make it easy. It's like buying a cell phone. You can't compare plan to plan. So very important when you start to look at retirement residences or the option of do I stay or do I go, what are my costs? The third C is choice. Where would I like to live? Is it close to my family? Is it far from my family? Is it close to my doctors? Is it close to my church? What's important for you? And so I'm going to suggest to you, as you move forward in the caregiving journey, that you remember the 3 C's as you start to think about what's going to work best. Now, there are a lot of options out there, a number of different kinds of alternative accommodations. My time is short. I'll only be talking about retirement residences, and that's only one slide, and I'll be talking about long-term care. So to talk about retirement residences very briefly, they've come a very long way. And while originally they were designed for independent seniors, the concept has changed. The builders and the management company have realized we don't all stay well forever. And so there's a concept of aging in place. Once someone makes a decision to move and packing up that home after 50 years, it's enough to decide that people aren't going to make the move. It becomes overpowering. So if a decision is I need to make a move for a variety of reasons, then you only want to move once. And you want to make sure that wherever you're looking at can accommodate your needs both today, tomorrow, and longer term. Especially if you're a couple and you both want to be together, how is this going to manage? So retirement residences are under a monthly tenant agreement. If there's a vacancy, you like what you see, you go through a nursing assessment, you're offered a room, you put down your deposit, it's yours. All of the retirement residences offer a range of services. Some will offer 1 meal to 3 meals. Some of these suites will have just a sink and maybe a microwave. Others will have a full kitchen. There's a full range of activities for socialization. There's medication monitoring, there's nurses available, there's personal support workers 24 hours, there's a doctor on call. Some of them have putting greens, some of them have saltwater pools. They can be beautiful. And for many seniors, it can really make a difference in their life in terms of having routine, regularity, and structure. 3 meals a day. And for seniors who are on their own, this is a big issue in terms of socialization. Prices today in Toronto range from about $2,500 a month to over $10,000. Okay, and that's a location issue, but it's also a care issue. So there's lots of questions to ask. And I'm going to suggest when you're ready to explore this, you start to tour and always stay for lunch. Okay, really important that you try the food. There are a few ways to try out a retirement residence today. A respite stay for the caregiver, and caregiver burnout, as we talked about, is a big issue. So sometimes that caregiver needs a break. Sometimes it's the adult child who's the caregiver, and they're working and they need to take a business trip. So one is able to check themselves into a retirement residence for a respite stay, or a convalescent stay, so recovering from illness, accident. Our stays in our hospital are very short. Our rehabilitation stays even shorter, and then we're invited to go home or pushed a little bit. Well, some are choosing to stay in a convalescent room in a retirement residence, so their needs will be looked after until they are ready to go back. And that price in Ontario, in Toronto now, I'll keep it general to Toronto, is about $100 to $120 a night. Okay, so a few options within there. The next option is long-term care. Now you may know this by a bunch of different names. This is our public sector once again. Old people's homes, nursing homes, there's a whole bunch of terrible names. But the proper term is long-term care. And this too is accessed through the Community Care Access Center. Okay, so once upon a time, an individual would say, I'm pretty good today in my own home, I'm not ready to go, but I think in a year or 2 or 3 I might be ready. And so they put their name down on the list. Well, again, as you're reading in the paper, we're maxed out. And so today in Ontario, by the time your application is taken, the eligibility is determined on your readiness to go on that very same day you have the assessment. It means your care needs are such today that you qualify for the care that's available in a long-term care facility, which is full nursing, access to doctors, all of your meals, and there's a selection of rooms. No matter where you are in the province of Ontario, the rates are the same. Basic room, which in the older facilities might be 4 to a room, today it's likely 2 to a room. To a semi-private, which can be either 2 beds in a room or a shared bathroom, $2,100, or a private room, which is your own room and your own bathroom for $2,500. And the respite stay for a long-term care facility is $37 a day. And every Ontario resident is eligible up to 90 days a year. So that can go a really long way for respite and time for the caregiver if they need a break, and for that care recipient to know that they're in a safe spot where their needs are going to be met. Important. And so today, you're invited to put your name and 3 or to 5 choices, okay? And the first available bed that gets offered to you is presented. Now, it could be your first or your 5th choice. It will be offered to you. You have about 24 hours to make up your mind. Now, families will say, it's my 5th choice. I don't really want to go there. If that's your decision, the CCAC now will take your name off of that waiting list, and you will not be able to reapply for 6 months. So my advice tonight is choose those 3 to 5 places very carefully, and when the bed is offered, be prepared to take it, and you can always keep your preferred facility's name on that list, and it will be offered when the bed comes available. Sometimes I get called a year or 2 after the fact, where the family will say, the bed's come up, you helped us choose our places, the bed's come up, at my preferred place, my mom's been at wherever for the last 2 years, what should I do? And I'll say, how's your mom doing? Is she settled? Is she content? Yep. Okay, so there may be no reason to move. Sometimes we get caught by what the exterior of the buildings look like, and really what's important is what's the care that's available to us. Okay for time? So the message here is about planning ahead, understanding what your resources are so you can make informed decisions. And the planning ahead is important so that you have choice, because if we wait, our choice gets taken away. And so these are important conversations to have. End of life decisions, really important, because the time that someone is unconscious, not able to speak for themselves, that is not the time to say, what do they want? Okay, especially if you're the adult child who's in that role. Spouses typically know, but sometimes it's really important to have that conversation with other family members. So, powers of attorney, advance directives. And again, the wellness binder is a place to hold that information. There are folks like me, geriatric care managers who are out there, who can help navigate the process. We're offering a consultation service now for 75 minutes to be able to sit down with a registered social worker for $150 to be able to get that direction so you can understand what your plan is. Advocacy, no matter who it is, you've got a family member going through the system, they need a strong advocate behind them. The CCAC, I've left the website on there. If any of you are thinking about applying, that will help you figure out by putting in your postal code, which is the appropriate office for you to call. And community navigation. So there's a lot out there. The question is what's right for you, because we're all unique and we all need something different. But community navigation is a great public resource that might help direct you. And the last point, as I said, geriatric care managers it's an American concept, but I've included the website there. So there are a few of us in Ontario, a handful in Canada, who provide this kind of service, and I invite you to take a look. A lot of information. I invite you to visit the website. There are articles, there are videos, there are YouTube blurbs on how to hire a personal support worker, or ways to avoid caregiver burnout, or how to look for a retirement residence. And I also blog with All About Estates, which is an estate planning venue with lawyers and financial advisors, and I provide the human nature side. So I'm going to be here for a little while afterwards and open to questions. And I invite you to go online and take a look around, and there's a whole wealth of information out there. Over to my colleague, Bev. Thank you.
We're all relying on tech support tonight. Thank you so much. I do have to apologize. I've got a little cold, so I will try not to have too froggy a voice. Now I don't, oh yeah, so I am in the right spot. Sorry. So thank you. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to be here this evening and to share my perspective. And you've just heard my colleague Audrey talking about the need to understand costs, the options, and to plan ahead. Well, planning ahead is my theme as well. So I'm going to start by talking about what is a wealth advisor and how could that apply to you. So there are two main roles that I perform as a wealth advisor. One is providing professional investment advice to manage my clients' money. And they're often looking for capital preservation. They're looking for the best way to grow their money, as well as they're looking for ways to take income from their savings. The second big role that a wealth advisor has is financial planning. And we know that many people have an informal financial plan and have a good understanding or an idea of what they might need. But the type of planning I'm talking about is formalized, that looks at all aspects of your financial life today as well as in the future. So while I'm very happy to take your questions on investments and what's going on in the markets, if that's relevant, and there's any interest there in the Q&A. Tonight I'm focusing on financial planning. So the goals of financial planning are to take control, to allow you to be proactive, as well as to make better and more informed financial decisions. It's a process that results in a written document called a financial plan, and it involves, when we're doing these formalized financial plans, we work with a multidisciplinary team of experts, including tax, legal advice, resources such as Audrey. And we look at all the financial aspects of your life over your projected lifespan. And we have some clients that ask us to project a lifespan of 100. We have some that say, no, I want you to project my lifespan to age 80. We've got the flexibility to do that. It includes a summary of life goals, net worth, so that's savings minus debt. We look at income and expenses while you're working, while you're retired. We estimate estate values, as well as we'll identify action steps that may improve the financial situation of our clients. Some of you may have seen this particular cartoon. It was published in the Globe and Mail in August, and that was the week that the markets took a huge dip. And you can see that there's a tiny boat in the middle of that big sea of water, and it's supposed to represent the Toronto Stock Exchange. And the message, and the reason I put this slide in here is to say, to remind you, you don't want to be out in rough seas without a life jacket. Planning ahead can help to protect you. So these are the most common questions that we're asked when we're looking at a financial plan. Do I have sufficient income and savings to cover my expenses today as well as in the future? What sources of income do I have and can I rely on? A lot of people are asking us, can we stop working now, or do I have to work longer, and if so, how much longer? And what would happen to my lifestyle and my planned retirement if I'm forced to retire and stop working sooner? And some people are asking us, can I afford to leave a legacy or donate to a charity such as the Parkinson Society? Sandy asked me to put that plug in. I'm teasing her. So this summer I was golfing with a woman, and we were just comparing notes about our lives. She's probably 70, and she told me that when her husband was 50, he had a massive stroke, and for the next 5 years their life was in turmoil. And I was telling her that I was anticipating speaking with you this evening, and she said, I've got this really important life lesson to pass on. And that is, if you are the adult child or the less involved spouse in a couple relationship, it's absolutely essential that you start to understand what you have, where your money and your savings are, how to write a check. This particular woman had never written a check. She was embarrassed to tell me. And if you're the one that is responsible for that and take charge, and we know it's very common in a couple situation that just by delegation of family and household responsibilities that one takes charge. If you're the one that's the most involved, involve your less involved spouse. A life crisis is a very, very difficult time to have to learn about managing money. And this woman was talking about her challenges. And crises are not just major health issues. There's death, there's divorce. So where would you go to get a financial plan if you are agreeing with me that they're valuable to have? Working with personal banking officers at the major banks, they have the skills and the resources to complete a financial plan. The insurance companies, the mutual fund companies would have retirement planning tools on their website. Wealth advisors such as myself, the major banks have websites with different resources. And just last week, I noticed that the Globe and Mail has published a new section. It's called Globe Retirement, and I think it's each Thursday, they're going to publish an article, but they've established a website that is Toronto Globe and Mail, so tgam.ca/retirement. And there's a lot of very interesting sections on that website. It's early days, but I think it's got potential to be a really wonderful resource, and maybe we'll see my two colleagues and myself contributing if they're looking for contributors to that. But it looked quite useful, and there's some interactive tools. So how could a financial plan help you? We know it allows us to look at various scenarios and trade-offs. And we look at the impact of higher or lower expenses. Another example is looking at selling assets, such as a house or a cottage, or collapsing a tax-free savings account? And when's the best time to do that? And how can that help improve the cash flow situation, especially in the later years? And those types of discussions and modeling of various scenarios in a financial plan lead to some very informed and potentially heated discussions. I can think of one couple, the husband just assumed that they would live in their house forever, and the wife said, "Are you kidding? We're going to be out of this house by age 80. We don't want to live here forever." It also leads to more information, and in particular, I wanted to talk about estate planning. I've worked with numerous clients when we've done a financial plan, and the projected estate values were huge compared to what they were anticipating they would be. And it wasn't necessarily their goal. And my message here is that probably most of you have supported a family, your loved ones, you've raised children, and maybe now's the time to take care of yourself. And if you had a financial plan that projected a larger than anticipated estate plan, it could allow you to draw on more of your savings when you need them. You're certainly not alone in terms of the issues that you're facing. And in the fall, Bank of Montreal published the results of a study that showed that about 40% of the respondents in their study are worried about losing their ability to live independently. And people were commenting in terms of reporting how they're intending to deal with those expenses. And close to 3/4 were talking about relying on their savings. Almost half were going to start taking government benefits. 20% were contemplating a reverse mortgage, and less than 20% of the respondents had long-term care insurance that they were going to rely on. The final 2 points, and I apologize, they're low down in the slide. 37% of those surveyed had not discussed these issues with their partner or their loved ones. And it certainly shows that there's lots of work to be done in terms of talking about these issues and getting them on the table and starting to look at various options. An Angus Reid poll in the summer showed that nearly half of Canadians were forced to retire earlier than they had planned. 27% were struggling, and people were worried about outliving their savings. But just to provide another perspective, there are numerous articles in the financial press. This one happened to be from C.D. Howe Institute, but they were suggesting that the financial community is overstating how much we need to live on in our retirement. And you might have heard some of the conventional wisdom that we all need to be prepared to fund up to 70% of our pre-retirement income. And their findings and their report suggested that 50% was enough. So how do you really know? And that's where I suggest that having a financial plan that's developed specifically to your circumstances, your situation, would be very helpful and give you the reassurance that you need. As you look ahead to the future and your later years, Audrey has already mentioned some of these things. Will you live at home? Will you be supported in long-term care? Will you be able to live together with your spouse? Or will you have to fund 2 separate residences? Do you have hobbies or interests that will allow you to enjoy them while you're active, or have interests that you can be involved with when you need quieter time, or activities or hobbies that will keep your brain active or allow you to socialize and meet other people? The other thing is the importance of a broad network of people. And you don't want all your friends to be at your age and stage, or your support network at your age and stage. You want to have a broad network of friends and helpers that are at various ages and gender. The other rhetorical question I ask is, will you also be caring for your aging parents? And it's interesting, as we know that the boomers are moving into retirement, they're coexisting with their aging parents. And that's the first generation that that's ever happened to. So there are 4 sources of retirement income that most Canadians use and rely on. The first is government benefits, old age security, the guaranteed income supplement, the Canada Pension Plan, and I'll say a little bit more about them in a second, a company or employment pension, and if you've got one, you can count yourself as very fortunate. Less than 40% of the Canadian population has a pension from their employer. I'm sure many of you have worked hard over your careers, and we save money in various buckets to support us in our retirement. So RRSPs, locked-in retirement accounts, tax-free savings accounts. You may have investments that are unregistered. And then the 4th pillar of retirement income or source of income is a residence or other savings, art, antiques, a cottage, and those hard assets can be sold and freed up and free up cash that can be used for your retirement expenses. The old age security is a monthly pension for people that are 65 and older. And it has nothing to do with your employment history. It's based on Canadian residency. So if you were born in Canada and you've lived in Canada for at least 40 years, you would get the maximum benefit. And in 2015, that's $570 a month, so just shy of $7,000 a year. If your household income is between low $70,000 a year and a maximum of $118,000 a year, that old age security benefit is clawed back. So by income of 118, you don't qualify for old age anymore. If you're earning, say, 75,000, some of it's clawed back. The guaranteed income supplement is also a monthly benefit. It's non-taxable, and it's available to old age security recipients who have low income and who are living in Canada. And there's various amounts if you're single, if you're part of a couple, if you're taking the OAS or your significant other is not. But it's based on an annual review by the CRA to determine your eligibility. So the single supplement is $772 a month, and that's if the individual's income is around $17,000 a year. And the reason I want to draw that to your attention is that people may feel, well, there's no point in submitting an income tax return, but by submitting an income tax return, that allows the government to look at it. Canada Pension Plan, it's a monthly payment based on your employment history, so the years you've worked as well as your salary, as well as the age that you take it. So if you take it before age 65, your benefit is reduced. If you wait to the maximum of age 70, you get an incentive, you get more money. The average pension taken at 65 is $640 a month. But the maximum anybody could get would be $1,000 a month. So CPP has the potential to give you $12,000 a year. I've put Service Canada and their toll-free number at the bottom. You can you can Google OAS or CPP or just Google Service Canada. So in conclusion, my main message is prepare today for tomorrow. Begin the discussion and keep on talking. Thank you very much. wrong button.
He's telling me to get really close to the mic, so he must know that I'm soft-spoken. I too am very pleased to be here this evening. What Sandy didn't mention is that I've been practicing law for almost 33 years. So this didn't exist when I started to practice law, nor did the computer. So bear with me if I fail miserably at moving this thing up and down. So I just hit it? Okay. So as a lawyer, when I meet with clients, I'm typically doing, first of all, a will. And I hope that I'm preaching to the converted this evening and that all of you do have wills. But when we do will planning, we also talk about two other important documents, and that's the focus of my talk tonight. Those are powers of attorney. There are two types, a power of attorney for property and a power of attorney for personal care. So what is a power of attorney for property? It's a legal document that gives someone else the right to act on your behalf, even if you become incapable. I basically say to my clients that the attorney for property steps into your shoes, and they can do pretty much everything that you could do. They can bank for you, they can invest for you, they can manage your money, sell your home if it needed to be sold to provide for you. A lot of couples will say to me, well, if our house is joint, why do I need a power of attorney for property? And that is because your spouse, as the joint owner of your property, does not have the right to sell it on your behalf without this document, without the power of attorney for property. A power of attorney for property, okay, so this is where. Yeah, is it? Sorry, I told you I was inept. Oh, it's this one. Okay.
Did it move? No. Oh dear, we need help. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay. So I just hit that. Okay. Okay, the one thing they cannot do for you is they cannot make a new will for you, and I'll talk about that further. So, do you need a power of attorney? I think you do. Many of us will in fact need one. I think it's important that you do plan for your mental incapacity or decline. A power of attorney does not need to be utilized only when you're mentally incapable. You can ask your attorney for property to take on the role absent even your mental incapacity. You may just be physically not wanting to carry on with your banking and want somebody to do that for you. And it's only used, obviously, if you need it. So who should you choose to be your attorney for property? I always say to my clients, think of a trusted family member or friend. They should be probably your first choice. As between a husband and wife, it's usually you appoint your spouse to be your attorney, and alternatively you have one of your children as a backup in case you both become incapable. Sometimes we will use a trust company as an attorney for property, and that's really in circumstances where people don't really have any family or close friends that they feel are appropriate to take on that role. Make sure that your attorney for property, especially on the alternate attorney for property, is somebody who's age appropriate. It may not be wise if you're 80 years old to have your 80-year-old friend as your attorney for property, because the odds are high that one of you will fall down before the other and both be incapable. And make sure that they want to take on the job. I don't know how many cases I've had where the person was had appointed somebody as their attorney for property. They became incapable, and then the attorney says, I don't want this job. And then we're back to square one in terms of getting somebody appointed. When will a power of attorney for property be used? It is effective from the minute it is signed. That's an important aspect of the attorney for property document. It is valid at the time of signing. You may state, however, that it not be released or used until such time as you are incapable. However, I caution against doing that, quite frankly, because in my practice, I find it rare that someone is capable one day and completely incapable falling off the cliff the next day. Usually, people decline in a slippery slope, and so from my perspective, I think you want to just say it is valid from the time of signing, and oftentimes you will have a situation where people do release the document and ask people to take on their banking when they're still very capable, but they've lost interest. How will you or your chosen attorney know when you are incapable? Well, that can be a determination that's legally made either by your family doctor, or in Ontario, there are people called capacity assessors, and they have the right, they're appointed by government, they have the right under the Substitute Decisions Act to assess your capacity, issue a report, and then you're declared to be incapable. What does the term mental incapacity mean? Well, that depends. There are all kinds of different tests for capacity. Your capacity to make a will is different from your capacity to do a power of attorney for property, and is different from your capacity to manage your own property. So here's the definition of incapable of managing your property. You cannot understand information about your finances or property, or appreciate what can happen as a result of making or not making a certain decision about these issues. What powers does your attorney have? I've talked a bit about those already. Your attorney can pretty much do anything you could do if capable, except they cannot make a will. They can buy or sell your property, they can invest your money, they can pay your bills and expenses. A couple of things they cannot do, in addition to not making a will for you, they cannot change designations of beneficiaries under RSPs or RIFs or tax-free savings accounts, and they cannot change beneficiary designations under life insurance policies, because those things are akin to making a will, if you will. The other thing they cannot do, and nobody in my practice has ever wanted this done, they cannot borrow on your own assets for their own personal benefit. So what are the duties of an attorney? They must keep accurate records and accounts of their financial management. They must act in the best interests of the incapable person and not in their own interests. They should seek professional advice if required, and they must maintain the confidentiality of the person's finances. And of course, they have to report on the management of those finances, both to the incapable person, if that person still has the capacity to understand what's happening with their money, and ultimately to the beneficiaries in the estate of the incapable person when that person dies. And so this is a challenge that I see all the time in my practice. When someone dies, the executor will sometimes be different than the attorney for property, and the executor is duty-bound to find out what that attorney for property did during their management of the incapable person's property. And a lot of times we have situations where there's a long court battle because, in fact, the attorney for property was never told that they were required to maintain accurate records of everything they did for that incapable person. And now they're trying to reinvent the wheel and find information and gather information retrospectively, and that is a huge challenge for the attorneys if they haven't kept records for 10 years. Can you change your attorney? Yes, you can. You can, as long as you're capable, you can always revoke your document and appoint new people if you think that it's inappropriate. The person that you have in place, stay in place. I'm so pathetic at this. Okay, what's a power of attorney for personal care? That's the other legal document that we typically do when we're doing estate planning. It's a legal document that allows a person to make almost any decision of a personal nature that you could make. Things like medical treatment, housing, food, hygiene, clothing, safety. When is a power of attorney for personal care effective? Only when you are incapable of making your own personal care decisions. Only when you cannot articulate instructions will the attorney for personal care have the right to make instructions on your behalf. How will you know if you cannot make a personal care decision? A healthcare professional will determine if you're incapable of making a medical decision. As long as you can instruct a physician or another health professional, they will ask you, and you will make the decisions with respect to your own care treatment. You can require that independent evidence, such as a letter from your family doctor, be provided before an attorney for personal care can act. Again, I caution around requiring that as a precondition to the decision making, because it's not always the case that capacity, incapacity are easily determined. What if you're still able to make some decisions? Well, the Healthcare Consent Act says that you are capable and others need to prove that you're not capable. Now, my husband might debate that point with me sometimes, but the attorney can only make decisions when you cannot. Capacity is presumed, but if you're not capable, they can make decisions around what nursing home you'll go to. You can probably still make decisions about whether you like broccoli and want to eat broccoli until the very end, but blood pressure medication, things like that. If you're incapable, they can make all those decisions for you. Afternoon activities, you can probably decide whether you want euchre or bingo. Can your personal care power of attorney specify treatment? Yes, they can on your behalf. So they can make decisions around what heroic measures will be taken at the time of a fundamentally important decision around continuing your life. Will you have a feeding tube? What about life support? Will surgery be undertaken on your behalf? If the surgery merely extends your life and doesn't improve your life, it may be appropriate that it not be undertaken. And they can also make the CPR decisions on your behalf. Again, whom should you choose? A trusted family member is usually the first, or a friend. Make sure you have alternates in place. So oftentimes, as between a husband and wife, the spouse will be firstly appointed as the attorney for personal care, and then we'll have backups. Usually it's children if you have children. If you don't have children, then it's that trusted family friend. Again, think about age-appropriate people. Is your 80-year-old friend the right person for the job? And they ought to consent to act, because it is a critical role that they have, and if they don't want to take on the job, you should know that ahead of time. How do you get a personal care power of attorney and a power of attorney for property? Obviously, see a lawyer. There are forms that the Ministry of the Attorney General does provide, and you can get a kit and fill it out yourself. But you won't necessarily get the nuances about what is a joint power of attorney, what's a joint and several power of attorney. So in my estimation, it's better to just do all of your planning, both your will and your powers of attorney, with a lawyer. And that's it. Thank you.
Wow, that was great. Okay, so we are on time. So if you could please just take the next 10, 15 minutes tops to go back out into the halls, make sure that you have your passports all filled in, that you put the completed passports in the beige wooden basket on the table at the far end of the hall. I'll be bringing that in with me because at the end of the evening, as I said, we have a few prizes to give away, which is just great. And also plan to go to the monthly giving table. As I said to you earlier, we have a lovely prize for anybody who decides to become a monthly donor tonight or increase their current monthly donor donation. So I'm looking forward to being able to draw from a couple of names in that box as well. Okay, so on you go. Have a lovely few minutes break, and please, please, please come back between now and 10 after 8. I would really appreciate your cooperation. Thanks so much. Okay, so we're going on now to the question and answer portion for the evening. And the first question is for Audrey, who is the geriatric care manager. And the question is, how do I convince my mom that it is time to move out of her split-level home? She has a walker upstairs, a walker downstairs, but still insists on going up and down the stairs by herself. I'm assuming that this mom is, in the daughter's eyes at least, or in the son's eyes, unsafe. So, okay.
Difficult moms, right? Yeah, difficult moms. So this is a challenge, and there's a few issues that I wanted to highlight. We talk about a stay or go. So sometimes it's education, sometimes it's communication. As really close, is that? Yeah. Oh boy, yeah. I'm going to echo and hear myself. So two parts to that. Helping someone understand what the options are within the home can go a long way. So is a stair glide an option, for example? What's the cost of that? What's the cost of an elevator? Talking about what things are possible. Sometimes, if you're capable, and this comes back to the issue of capacity, sometimes we have to let nature take its course. Sometimes things have to unfold. If the person is capable and has made up their mind that this is how they want to do it, I'll ask the question if they understand the risks involved. Other times, I will use something that I like to call reverse guilt. And it's the conversation that the daughter or son has with the mom about their worry level. I'm so concerned, I'm so worried that when I don't get your phone call in the morning or when you don't answer the phone, it freaks me out. I can't concentrate, I can't think. Do it for me. Okay, and sometimes that can work as well. But if the person is capable, you can highlight what the issues are, you can make it as easy as possible, but ultimately they're going to make up their own mind.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for you, Bev, as the financial planner. Who would benefit from an RDSP? Would this apply now as someone who is 65, or just could you give us a bit more explanation about all of that?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to be reading my notes a little bit because it's somewhat technical. But an RDSP is a registered disability savings plan. And what happens is you can designate an individual as a beneficiary of an RDSP if they are eligible for the disability tax credit, they have a valid social insurance number, and they're a resident of Canada when the plan is opened. And they have to be under 60. So this is because the CRA allows contributions to go into a registered disability plan up to age 59. So don't wait till 65. The money can be accessed after 60 and 65, but to open it and fill it up with savings, you have to open it earlier.
Can I put you on the spot again for a minute? Because we do get a lot of questions also about the disability tax credit. And what does that mean? Is that putting you too much on the spot?
I'll find my handy notes.
Sorry.
So that I get it right. No, I understand that. You may just have to give me a moment.
Okay, so you know what?
Them.
I can go on and ask Sandra a question while you're looking, and we can come back to that.
Because I'm glad to answer it.
Okay, you okay with that?
You know what? I think I just found it.
Oh, okay.
Is that easier? Okay, so you're talking about the disability tax credits.
Yeah.
No, I didn't just find them.
Okay, Sandra, you look like you know.
I can speak to it very briefly because as when I'm an estate trustee, I am often looking at the tax aspects of the filings. Essentially, as I understand it, you can get a physician to complete a disability certificate, which then allows you to have a tax deduction of, I believe it's $10,000 for the disability tax credit. However, if you are resident in a nursing home, your nursing costs combined with any private duty nursing care that you may have opted for, that may well be higher than the $10,000 disability tax credit. So you really need your accountant to work with you around which is the best way to organize the deduction. Having the disability certificate allows you to make that call. If you're in one of these Uber retirement homes that's over $10,000 a month, a retirement home will, at the end of each fiscal year, break out for you what is care and what has been meals and accommodation. And the care component, again, is a deductible expense on your tax return. So you just need to get your accountant to play with the numbers to figure out where you get your best bang for your buck in terms of the tax impact of the disability credit.
Okay, fair enough. Are you okay with that, Bev? Did you find?
I mean, I can just quickly add, so a qualified practitioner must certify that somebody's eligible for it. The individual has to have a severe, prolonged impairment in physical or mental functions, and the disability tax credit certificate has to be CRA approved, and it's Form T2201.
Now, those may sound like just numbers to you, but they're actually extremely important. And the piece around the level of disability that people have to have. A lot of people think disability tax credit, well, Parkinson's is a disability, so therefore I must be able to. But the answer is really, it's for people who have advanced Parkinson's, and it's really quite stringent as far as what the qualifications are. So thank you, that answered that. Okay, Sandra, question about if my dad or mom does not have a power of attorney in place and is then unable to communicate for him or herself, who has the right to speak on his behalf? Now, I know you covered some of that, but if you could just reiterate that again.
So this speaks to the attorney for personal care. So personal care decision making. If you do not have a power of attorney for personal care, it is your next of kin who are your decision makers. So first of all, if you have a spouse, it's your spouse first. If you don't have a spouse or they're incapable, then it's your adult children. If you don't have a spouse or children, then it can be your parent, if your parent is still alive. If you don't have a parent alive, then it's your brothers and sisters, and eventually you default to anybody who's a relative can take on the job. We find that when these decisions need to be made around personal care, it's usually the pull the plug questions. Those do we take a positive step to end life? And quite frankly, the physicians will at that stage look to anybody who's physically there to help make that decision. But that's the order, basically, if you don't do it. So if you want somebody other than in that order, or if you want a different order, which I see a lot in my practice, where a couple is quite aged and they look to each other and they say, I think we're past this. I think we're past deciding it for each other. Why don't we instead do a personal care power of attorney that appoints one or two of our children and leave it to them to be the decision makers at first instance?
Okay, that's great. Okay, Audrey, back to you. What if my siblings and I don't agree on the best course of action for our parents? And we all have really equal standing. So how would you assist people if they can't all be on the same page?
I love my work with families, and one of my favorite expressions is the only normal families are the families you don't know. Which means we all have our histories, we all have our baggage, and as siblings, we often fight amongst ourselves that, hey, mom loved you better, or dad bought you the So unfortunately, it's often the history that comes up with the disagreement rather than the issue of care for a parent. So one of the roles that we have is sitting down with the family, a family meeting, where everyone can be around the table to be able to talk about worries, fears, concerns, and issues so that a plan of care for the parent can be put forward. And it's about putting the parents' needs first. It's not about the children's needs. So many times, money has something to do with it. And we get called in by the courts on those very issues when the children who are jointly powers of attorney are fighting, and they've lost sight of really what's in mom or dad's best interest. So a third-party mediator can be invited in to sit down. It could be a clergy person, it could be someone else, but it's got to be someone whose buttons aren't going to be pushed. And that's what happens amongst families quite often.
Okay. Okay, Bev, what does a Hansen trust, or how does a Hansen trust work?
So a Hansen trust is set up through your will, and it's used to hold the inheritance for a severely handicapped person. And the purpose of it is to kind of set those investments and savings aside so that the severely handicapped person is still able to qualify for government benefits. So there's an asset test and there's a means test.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, Sandra, did you have something you wanted to say about that? No? Okay. Another question for you. I hear that a DNR, or do not resuscitate form, has to be pretty much tattooed to my chest in order for healthcare professionals to pay attention. Why?
Well, it turns on the issue of how what happens when you're in that circumstance of having a decision that needs to be made about resuscitation or about treatment or about care. If you are in distress and your family is with you, or even a healthcare provider in a nursing home is there, a lot of times they feel it's incumbent on them to call the ambulance. As soon as that call is made, the liability of the ambulance service kicks in. And the ambulance people, when they respond, they must take action. They cannot act on a DNR because they would be potentially liable. So as soon as you make that phone call as a family member, you have to understand that there will be intervention undertaken on behalf of the person who's in distress. It's very difficult as a family to not make that phone call. And that's the challenge, I think. It's more a practical challenge that, yes, you can fill out the form, but you're going to have a lot of judgment calls along the way about when it's appropriate to really say, do not resuscitate, stand back and let nature take its course. That's very hard for a family to do, quite frankly.
Okay, Audrey, I have a question for you, and it's about couples living together when the caregiver or the care partner is feeling really burned out. A lot of people, I think, don't understand, first of all, what respite care is. And the second part to my question is, if the person with Parkinson's, in this case, refuses to go into, say, a facility of any kind for any reason, do you have any suggestions when you counsel caregivers about that sort of thing?
The first part for sure. So caregiver burnout, as I said earlier, caregiving is a dance. It's two people that are required here, and both parties need to have their needs met, or both parties are going to require care. Caregiver burnout is a concern, and it's the feeling of nothing left to give. And I see it with spouses who feel it's my job and only I can give care to my loved one in the way that they want it. Or the guilt that I see from adult children is also unbelievable, that it's their responsibility alone. It takes more than one person to be a caregiver, especially as care needs increase. And oftentimes what we see is the one spouse who is the recipient must have their other spouse around. And it can be very tiring emotionally. And of course, there's some financial issues that are also associated with caregiving. So respite is about taking some time for yourself, however that is going to look like. It could be bringing in a PSW to give you a break for 4 hours so you can have lunch with a friend, golf. You may need more than 4 hours. Get your hair done, go to a yoga class, go to an exercise class, whatever it is very important that it be built into a regular schedule. And this is the way it is. Every Wednesday belongs to me, and someone else needs to be helped. It's not just bringing respite into the home or a caregiver or someone else, but there are lots of day programs out there that also offer respite care, which means for an afternoon, a bus can pick someone up, take them off to the community group, and it might be a men's club, it might be a specialized activity, again, depending on the ability of the person and the interest of the person, where they may have lunch, they may have an exercise program, and the other partner is either on their own and has some free time, or they may attend a caregiver support group, which is also vital for all of us. And I know that no matter, I mean, here we're talking about a particular disease, but all of the disease groups have their own organization with education groups and support groups, which are very, very important. The second part of your question is of concern, because no one can be forced to do anything unless you're acting under power of attorney. And as it was clearly mentioned, capacity fluctuates, and it also is dependent on what the issue is. So I can be capable of deciding I want my broccoli, and I want to do A, B, and C, but I'm surely not going into that long-term care facility. So respite is, I think, just part of the caregiving journey that has to be factored in, but it doesn't mean someone has to necessarily go out of the home to a retirement or long-term care. And so there's different ways to be able to look at the support that both people require.
Over the years, in conversations that I've had with caregivers, care partners, caregivers who were able to keep their loved ones at home for quite long periods of time, they used the 90 days that are, and I wondered if you could just elaborate on that again. I'm not sure, because I know you did talk about it, but if you could just give a bit more information about that.
So through, again, the Community Care Access Center, one can call them and say, I'm looking for a respite stay in a long-term care facility. And you'd have a care manager who would come out and tell you the facilities that are offering a respite stay, which means there's an available room. Sometimes it's a private room, sometimes it could be a shared room. And there is a long wait list, which means if you know today that you're planning something next summer, that might be the time to start that planning for a particular long-term care facility that might be your first choice of where you'd like your loved one to go. As I said, every Ontario resident is eligible up to 90 days of care at a long-term care facility if they're eligible. Okay, that's the first determination of eligibility of care.
Which means?
Which means that the CCAC has determined that your care needs are such that they can no longer be met in the community. Either the care costs exceed what can be brought in, or there's no one to provide the care. There is no one. And long-term care, as I say, might be a wonderful option for many seniors. We're working with a number of individuals who've outlived their family and friends. They've got no one. And it can be a very sad state of affairs if one is all alone, has dementia, and just loses that connection of necessities of life. So, and sometimes public guardian will be involved in those kinds of cases where there is no family to help make a decision, and the person's well-being is in jeopardy. They can no longer manage. Okay,
that's fair enough. I personally had an experience a few years ago where the caregiver took advantage of the 90 days, and she had her husband go into a facility of his religious choice, so it happened to be of their faith. And when it came time for him to be placed, for him, he said, "Oh, I'm just going to go to my other home now." It was just a natural progression, as opposed to some place that was completely foreign. She used that 90 days over, I'm going to say probably a 4-year period, but it was just a gradual progression of care, and as his care needs grew, even he was not phased. Now, I know that that's a lovely story, but it's not just a story, but I can believe that that could happen, to other people too, because once the individual gets used to the fact that they're comfortable. I think part of the resistance for people to accept care is because they're used to their wife, their family doing the care for them, and they're really scared about somebody new coming in. For him, it was just like, oh, I'm now going to go to my other home, a place where he felt really safe. So it was easy for them.
And you're right, we're all resistant to change. So that's a very nice way of looking at the planning and the transition of what we can get used to and the comfort level. So great story.
So another question for Sandra, and I think this is going to be our last question that we are going to put forward, but I think we could open the floor if you, any of you have some burning things that you would like to ask our speakers. This question is around, my dad's specialist has stated that he feels my dad has dementia. My mom took him to the emergency room, but the emergency room doctor said he was fine. He was just competent to go home. And that's what my dad wanted to do. What the doctor in the emergency department doesn't know is that my dad gets violent at times, but my mom always compensates for him and has covered up for him until now. Now what do we do? Okay, obviously. Sorry about that. That's a toughie.
Now, this is when the family dynamics really get interesting.
Yes.
But I think if you as the child see your one parent in a risk environment, you need to speak up and take some action. Most interactions with the medical community now are team-based. So if you're getting resistance from the emergency room doctor, maybe you approach the social worker on the floor or in the department and make it known that there is a real risk associated with dad going home. And mom has been covering. One of the saddest cases I ever dealt with as a lawyer was a situation where a couple, they didn't actually have children, so they were very isolated, and he had had dementia for years, and his wife covered for him for years. So the nieces and nephews never knew that there was really a huge problem at home. She had bruises all the time. And in the end, he murdered her in their home, and it became a really interesting legal issue around does he inherit. But I think that is a shocking result that can occur if people are not proactive. Neighbors, watch in your neighborhood if you see people who are clearly in a state of compromised capacity. Is it appropriate that they be in their home? Is it appropriate that they be in their home with their spouse or alone in their home? We have a responsibility, I think, as a community to take care of vulnerable people.
If I may add
Absolutely.
something. It's a terrible story. Yeah. So I see that as well, and the covering up is not an uncommon piece. It's the violence which is of concern. So there are a lot of resources out there, and there's programs called the Geriatric Outreach Service that one can access through a family doctor, where a psychiatrist will come to the home and make an assessment. There is a seniors crisis line that will provide services. If anyone is fearful for themselves or for their spouse, either harming themselves or someone else, 911 is an appropriate first course of action. Other times, family members can go through Justice of the Peace program to have someone admitted against their will, involuntarily, they are called being formed, for a period of observation in a psychiatric facility. So, big issue. There are resources out there, 911 being the most immediate, but if you go a little bit further, there are geriatric specialists, psychiatrists, crisis outreach, and the community navigation number I gave you. You can, or email me, I'll send you the crisis resource line, but there's supports out there that no one should have to feel fearful for their safety.
I'll just make a quick comment, if I may. We've talked about physical and mental abuse, but I can tell you within the financial community that staff in the banks and in the investment firms, et cetera, are being trained regularly in terms of watching for signs of incapacity, but also abuse. And this is more of the financial abuse. And so that's another community, a little more removed than a caregiver, but is trying to watch out. And if we do suspect a problem, we have a responsibility to advance the issue forward.
Okay, now, does anyone in the audience have a very specific question that they were hoping to have answered tonight? Don't feel pressured, but if you do, this is your opportunity. Yes, sir.
It's a question for Sandra about the powers of attorney for property. You said it becomes effective as soon as it's signed, and it's clearly a powerful document. So, do I understand that you should not give that power of attorney document to the attorney, but you should just inform them of where they can find it? Is that the way it's done?
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if everybody heard that question, but the issue is the power of attorney for property is valid at the time of signing. Should I keep that document in safekeeping and not give it to my attorney for property? And yes, basically, don't give it over until you think it's appropriate that the person takes steps on your behalf to act for you in terms of your financial management. Typically in my practice, I get multiple copies signed. I keep a full set of everything in my office, and then I give my clients a set to take with them. And I say to them, don't put it in a safety deposit box, because that's only as good as somebody having the key to get in there. But keep it in safekeeping in your home, and certainly not let your attorneys for property know that they've been appointed and where the document is as and when it's necessary to be used. But as I also said, I see in my practice that it is the rare case where somebody is at a point where they're mentally incapable and therefore the attorney must act. Most people recognize that as they age, they are not making good choices for themselves in terms of investments, in terms of financial management. They can be subject to being unduly influenced, and we see the situations where suddenly someone is ingratiating themselves with this older person, and $5,000 is going from the bank account on a regular basis. And so you will oftentimes want your attorney for property to start acting on your behalf to protect you from yourself, really, well before you're incapable.
Are there any? Yes, you have a question.
Yes, so I noticed a POA for personal care and POA for finances. So this property is a third one?
It's the finances one. It's called, under the Substitute Decisions Act, it's called an attorney for property. And property means basically everything that you have, your house, your car, your investments, all the financial aspects of your life. And that's why they call it an attorney for property. And it doesn't have to be the attorney who's appointed. That's the other thing that people get a misnomer about. Only in America are lawyers called attorneys. In Canada, we're called barristers and solicitors. So people think, oh, my attorney has to be my attorney for property. No, they don't.
And so is there any other POA that the spouse or adult child
No, the only, so the question was, are there any other documents beside the power of attorney for property and for personal care? No, there's not a formal legal document per se. And Audrey can probably speak to this better than I can, but a lot of times to the attorney for personal care document, we will attach something called a medical directive, where if you are emphatic about certain things that you want to have happen in a circumstance where you're not able to decide, you can articulate that in this written directive called the medical directive. And I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, we briefly talked about it. So advanced directives, it too has different names, but it's about what your wishes are and how you'd like to have your end of days respected. Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the audience? No? Okay. Well, I think we've come to the end of our speakers portion. Don't worry, we're going to do the prizes. Hang on there, but I need to thank our speakers tonight. I want to thank each and every, yeah. I used to say the only thing I needed to do was to be born and die. Everything else in between is my choice, and this is my choice tonight to thank all of you very much for putting all of your, not just your thoughts down, share your expertise, but obviously you're caring, and you're all very, very caring people. And one thing that I didn't say about Sandra, including the number of years that she's been in practice, but she deserves a huge accolade tonight. She drove all the way here from Hamilton. Yay! As far as I'm concerned, anytime you venture on that QEW, it's like tuk to me. Anyway, thank you very much for all of the thought and caring, literally, that you've put into your presentations tonight. And my take-home message, I think, big picture, is conversations. Keep talking and talking and talking about every aspect of what you want for you in terms of your life's journey. And make sure to ask for those directions. We started off tonight talking about those who don't ask for directions and what can happen. You can get pretty lost in the system, so don't let that happen.